Okay, I'll do another reading vlog, why not? This reading vlog is going to be fun because we're going to be closing out the Sarantine Mosaic. So I'm going to be going over The Lord of Emperors by Guy Gavriel Kay. Pretty good way into this. I think I'm only going to need one more update until I finish it because it's just been a pleasure to read. And in every way, in my opinion, has been a step up from Sailing to Sarantine, which is great. I'm also going to be covering author that I love and has been a pretty big piece of my channel and its growth and people coming in and joining the community, which is Hobb, but it's not Fitz. It's not Realm of the Elderlings. I've already read all of those. I missed them quite a bit, but I'm trying her much less known and definitely well less liked series, the Soldier Son trilogy. This ended up being one of my patrons picked this for the month of May. And it starts out with Shaman's Crossing. I don't know if I'll read books 2 and 3, depends on how this goes. But this is, without a doubt, not super popular. Even the people that read it don't seem to love it. There are people who do enjoy it. I know some of them, but far more polarizing than Realm of the Elderlings happens to be. The one thing that kind of strikes me about the 2 books that I'm talking about, and I have a 3rd book, I'll bring it up at the end because it's very short and I just kind of threw it in randomly, but the one thing I want to say, starting out this reading vlog, is I'm just remembering how important opening chapters are, which is like, as readers, we know because that's how we get hooked, but also when it comes to like people trying to get published, there's always talking about like, you gotta hook it, you gotta start media res, middle of battle or something, like that's the way to do it. And I think that Lord of Emperors and Shaman's Crossing kind of refute that in a way, because I think both of them have really good opening chapters, so much so that I think that they would make excellent short stories, like both of them. You know, in Lord of Emperors, we open up with a surgeon who is thrown into a very important situation and one that could change the rest of his life, but in no ways is it this action-packed thing, but it's full of drama, and it also introduces you to a character that's not even in book 1 and does a fabulous job of it. It immediately becomes one of my favorite characters in this duology within 1 chapter. No big battle scene, no shocking twist really. And the same thing with Shaman's Crossing. You know, at least I can say about this, about the opening of this book, it did hook me. And I thought that it kind of painted the situation in the world that which it is in, but it also introduces us to the characters, shows some conflicts, and there is like a big moral dilemma pretty much at the very start, without it being massively action. Now there is some action in both of them, but it's not the center, it's not the grabbing point. It's more so the circumstances around it and what we've been like introduced to. And I just love stories that can do this, can hook me out of the gate. You know, sometimes it doesn't always, you know, hold my attention the entire way through, but I can at least say it's a promising start, which is awesome. In Lord of Emperors, just like Sarantine Mosaic, which I loved, I think that this is one of, if not Kay's best writing. I think that it is just absolutely beautiful. I love picking up where we left off, which I won't say because I don't want to spoil book 1, but seeing a mosaist just like being put in like the worst situations, and not something you would ever imagine would be like majorly political or scheming or any of that stuff, right? Like he's a mosaist, he's just supposed to do his art, but when money goes into these things and their efforts to make a statement of sorts, and in this case, you know, the mosaic is an order from the emperor and he wants to kind of make amends maybe for some of the things that have happened during his reign. So there's like a lot riding on it just outside of it being art and beautiful to look at and thought-provoking, but it's also a place where money goes and religious depictions and should we show these things? And I don't know, it's kind of impressive how Guy Gavriel Kay takes things that would be mundane or just a simple job title and turns it into so much more. And a lot of the Sarantine Mosaic and Lord of Emperors, this is where it's really clicked for me with the new character that's a surgeon, which by the way, Guy Gavriel Kay does surgeons or medical staff better than anyone. Like there's a doctor character, medical character in Lions of Albersan that was also excellent, and this one's just as good, which is cool. But it's like people having titles in society or one role and then moving past that, like the fallout of like what happens when life moves on or big circumstances happen, and how no one is simply just the role. And it kind of reminds you of yourself, I think, like in some ways, because for me, you know, I could just be a software developer. I could just be a book person, but I'm a lot more to that depending on who I'm talking to. And Guy Gavriel Kay definitely shows that there's more than just one element to any person. And there's so much emotional investment for me in the characters, even in just a few brief pages. So far, I'm a little bit over halfway through Lord of Emperors. Like I said, I've been reading this pretty fast. But the one thing I can say that is being reaffirmed to me is that Guy Gavriel Kay writes dramatic scenes almost better than anyone, as he keeps the identity. Like, he will go through a whole scene without saying someone's name, but based on the circumstances and how people are talking, you kind of have an idea of what's going on and who's involved. But he will like twist that and take different point of views around dramatic situations that really does build to something special. So I can say this, it's not really a spoiler. There's another chariot race about to happen. I'm so excited. I never thought I'd be super excited about chariot races, but if you know how I felt about them in Sailing to Sarantium, I've heard that the Lord of Emperors scene is even better. So more to come as I finish this. I know that since it's a book too, I can't talk about it as much, but one book I can talk about a lot is Shaman's Crossing. Like I said, the opening was very solid. I think that we're going to see kind of the colonizer and the colonized situation play out. We have like plains people, and we have people who are trying to civilize the barbarians. This is a tried and true story that we've seen in fantasy many, many times. I'm curious to see what Robin Hobb will do with it, because I think Robin Hobb is very thoughtful and intelligent. I think she has a decently gloomy outlook on life, one that I probably agree with more than I disagree with, depending on what the subject matter is. But the one thing I will say is it almost feels like I'm reading a classic. I think Robin Hobb has a very active voice when she writes. There's very much doing going on, if that makes sense. Every single sentence feels active, even whenever it's describing the scenery. She assigns like lifelike, human-like traits to nature or setting pieces, and it really does bring it alive. Her prose can be snappy at times, but also she will take time to go off on a big, long, hyphenated sentence that sometimes can, for me at least, be very impressive. There's something lacking here that I never felt was lacking in Realm of the Elderlings. It feels a little stiff, and I don't want to use the word soulless yet, but maybe a little bit soulless. She's clearly skilled as a writer. I believe that. I think she also writes very strong from the perspective. We are following around another young man here, a soldier's son who has expectations upon him. Seems like the dad is very well renowned, very well respected as a former military guy. I don't know yet if he's really the best dad. That remains to be seen. I am only just a little bit in here. I think I'm 3 or 4 chapters in. And the main character has already been put through some hard stuff, which, you know, Robin Hobb's kind of infamous for putting her characters through shit. I mean, she doesn't treat them very nicely. And I've heard that this series is even actually more bleak than Realm of the Elderlings. So I'm kind of interested to see that. With Realm of the Elderlings, even with all the bleakness, I always found a subtle amount of beauty in some of the interactions between people, like her dialogue and conversations that I think are fairly common in everyone's lives, that you eventually have to have tough conversations. I always thought she wrote those very well. I haven't got to that point quite yet, though there was a father and son conversation in the first chapter that I found to be pretty powerful. I'm hoping that I get a little bit more attached to this main character. I do trust the process, so I'm still open to that happening. But so far, I definitely feel like I'm at a bit of a distance with the POV, and I am kind of observing, and I'm learning more about the cultures, which she does do a nice job of. I think that some of it's explained a little bit info dumpy, but for the most part, it's fairly organic, which is nice. It's also not that hard to figure out. Robin Hobb's world building in Realm of the Elderlings is certainly not overly complicated, in my opinion, and I don't foresee this being much more complicated. I don't know why so many people dislike this, by the way. The only thing I ever hear is that it's not fits or it's way too bleak. So I would say that the opening chapter was super strong, but since then I haven't felt as grabbed. And there are a lot of long chapters with a lot of setting being described. So I'm kind of waiting to get more into the meat of it. I know that she's more of a methodical writer and slower pace. I'm okay with that. But I'm kind of hoping to see a little bit more. I'm still early on, so the future updates in this vlog, obviously I'll have a lot more to say, hopefully, about how it's going. And yes, I do love Robin Hobb, but no one gets a free pass here. You know, she earned a lot of goodwill with me. I do have criticisms about Realm of the Elderlings, even though it's one of my favorite series. But, you know, no free passes here. So if it does not stand up to the expectations that I have set out, which may be fair or not fair, I will say it. And I hope to be one of the cool kids that likes her other series that isn't Realm of the Elderlings, but who knows? We're just going to have to see. And the last one I wasn't supposed to read this month, but my friend Mitch, who's like the greatest internet troll of all time, he read A Pale View of Hills by Ishiguro, which this is the debut novel. This same person wrote Remains of the Day, or more famously, Never Let Me Go, though I haven't read that. And this is about a mom dealing with one of her daughters' suicide. And it's not in the moment, but after the fact. And I believe it also ties into post World War II Japan and kind of maybe informs some of the situation. I don't really know. I don't know much about it, but I've read the first 3 chapters, which are very short. This is only about a 180-page book, I think. So that, maybe 1 or 2 more updates for this one. But so far, beautiful. I don't think it's as simple and elegant as I found Remains of the Day to be, but it's doing something a lot different, though still speaking to, like, obviously the human condition and grief and all these other emotions. But so far, I mean, I am compelled. And it's like a broken record, but the first chapter of this book could probably be its own short story. And it's kind of sprinkling in flashbacks along with present day. And there's almost like a mysterious, I don't want to say horror or fantastical, but there's an eeriness to the flashbacks talking about this mother who seems very aloof and not a great mom, but has this like mysterious child that's seeing people, but apparently that person isn't alive anymore. Very interesting. I like the fact that it's kind of dipping its toes into maybe a little bit of that fantastical element. And it certainly did have a little bit of creepiness to it, to be honest with you. There was a pretty tense scene, chapter 3, I believe, that had me hooked and made me stay past my bedtime. So that's always a good thing. This is the first update to this reading vlog. I think it's just going to be these 3 books. I also may throw in something else towards the end, but I would like to start trying to do 2 reading vlogs a month to give you guys a little bit more. The interludes for this are probably going to be B-roll that I took from New York City trip that was just last week. But also there's a book festival locally, and I'm hoping to get there. And if people seem friendly, I might just ask them a few questions, but we'll have to see if that actually happens. So great start, beautiful opening chapters. I want more chapters this well thought out, well constructed to lay the foundation for what type of story you're trying to tell me, but also to identify some of the themes, which I think are pretty evident here. So we will see how Lord of Emperors ends up, and hopefully Shaman's Crossing can grip me post chapter 1, hopefully. All right, this is going to be a pretty short update, but I am riding with the wonderful Mrs. Nuts in the car. We're heading to Books in Bloom. Is that what it's called?
It is.
Okay, so Books in Bloom. I'm going to go check it out. Basically, it's a festival about books and authors and, just kind of pride around being readers and literacy and all these other things. I have no idea what to expect from it other than there's a bunch of authors there, which seems cool. I don't know any of them, but some of them have some sort of, like, acclaim, it would appear, but it does seem popular. A lot of people are down there. There's like food and stuff, I think. Yeah, there's an ice cream shop down there that does special things. I don't know. We're just gonna go check it out. I want to see what the fuss is, and if readers are getting together, it's probably gonna be a fun time. So outside of that, I have 20 pages left in A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. Hopefully, we almost ran over a squirrel. We didn't though, thank God. I have like 20 pages left in that, and it's great. It's fantastic. I'm realizing what the book is more about now, which really is just the transitional period post-World War II and like the effect it had on noble families, societal structures, and even education. But it's all done in a way that is like very day-to-day and human, and I like it. I like it quite a bit. There's even some really good irony in there. That's great. And then there's an old man that's just full of projections, which I think is accurate for the most part, and maybe even just slightly funny. That mysterious element I talked about in this book prior is still there, though I think we're getting a little bit more context around it, and I don't know if it's necessarily mysterious now as much as it is just kind of sad. There's some questions I still have, but some really harrowing fallout pieces. Taking this turn so aggressively. I was leaning. My goodness. We do have some answers, though, but I don't think that
everything's gonna get answered by the end of this thing. But just some really sad and horrifying things from the fall of World War II and going through Nagasaki. And there's talks of Tokyo as well, which didn't have the nuclear bomb, but obviously was bombed. At least that's what I gathered from the book. So yeah, really enjoying the book, enjoying it. Let's see what this festival's about. Probably just have B-roll from here, unless if I find some people I want to talk to, then maybe I'll do some interviews. But no guarantee on that. I don't know what the vibe is, so we're just have to play it by ear.
I don't have my mic on me, but I want to film right now because I just finished a book and I want to talk about it. We did go to the book festival, and it was not the atmosphere for street interviews, if that makes sense. I didn't feel like the energy was there, and I want it, I want it to be maybe informative or journalistic, loosely, probably not. I need it to be entertaining. This is not a place that I felt like the tone was very serious, and then anything that wasn't serious was kind of gauged towards kids. It was a lot of kids stuff, which is cool. I'm glad. We need to encourage kids to read and stuff. But for me and Mrs. Nuts, there was only a little couple things there. Cool shops, there was books there. There was also like other food vendors and stuff. We ended up eating at a really great place that opened up here that we loved. But really great festival, cool, tons of people there. It was actually wild. I thought the author interviews that were going on sounded kind of interesting, but the only one that was maybe calling to me was already in progress. So it ended up, it was nice. It was good to go, but it wasn't something where I felt like, okay, let's bust out the microphone. I'm going to interview all of these people. Felt like a very structured event. So I didn't want to be the jackass with a with my phone and microphone out. So we didn't get any interviews, but we got some cool B-roll footage, and it was a great time. We had a good time. It's beautiful outside. But I came home and I finished A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I talked about right before we went to the festival. I came back and I read this for like the last 30 or 40 minutes, I think. And this was not meant to really be in this reading vlog. It also was not a book that I was planning on talking about much. This book has shocked me quite a bit. I think Remains of the Day is a overall more solid book, but this is his debut. And I had to film this because I finished the book and I realized that everything I had just read, I missed so much stuff. So what I can tell you is I opened up this reading vlog saying that it was about a mother dealing with the suicide of her daughter. Her other daughter from a different father is visiting her, and it's talking about post-World War II, all that stuff. I already told you that. The crazy thing is I think I could read you the first chapter and the last chapter of this book, and it would kind of sum up a lot of, hey, daughter comes, daughter leaves. It wouldn't spoil a single thing for you because even though this book on its surface is very simple and maybe to many you could read it and say nothing happened. It's so boring. It's like a little flashback about her husband having a thing at work, and her father-in-law comes, and there's this weird girl and her mother, and like there's that eerie mystery to it that I talked about. But the crazy thing is I finished this book and it may be one of the most psychological books I've ever read. And I didn't even realize what was happening as I was reading it. Like there were moments where you're kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird. But when you finish the book and you close it and then you start thinking about a lot of the scenes, you're like, oh, it was literally all about the narrator. And that's all I can say without spoiling anything. But like, sometimes I trust narrators when I read. I know you guys know I love unreliable narrators, but like it didn't click in my head that this could be an unreliable narrator. So at its face value in the plot, this isn't going to blow your socks off. It's not some huge murder mystery or anything like that. And you could read it and be like, all right, that was done, moving on. But if you're into like psychological fiction, this is really good. Wow, what a surprise. 183 pages. Did not expect this at all. I had to go and turn on my phone and just do this now because I literally just finished it. And woo-wee. So in the next update, most likely, I'm going to go to the gym now. probably read a little bit of Lord of Emperors when I get done. I'll probably get that done in the next day or two. And then the rest of the reading vlog will be Shaman's Crossing by Robin Hobb, which I haven't made progress on in a couple days. I'm still where I was in the last update because I've been trying to focus on Lord of Emperors to get it done. And yeah, that's about it. So I'm going to go get a pump at the gym, and I will talk to you very soon.
How's the coffee?
Fantastic.
Fuck yeah. I had picked this location to talk about some books because my cat was sleeping right here. It was adorable. And of course, as soon as I hit, record, get set up to record, he moves. So maybe he'll come back halfway through the shoot. I guess you get some cool greens in the background, though. So Lord of Emperors by Guy Gavriel Kay is finished. I've done it. I've finished the Serentine Mosaic, another series I can check off my list. It does feel good finishing series nowadays because I don't do it as often as I used to. And this is one that I'm so glad that I stuck around. One of the things that happens with a lot of series is like I start it and book one's good enough, but it doesn't stick with me. Serentine Mosaic, I read it pretty quickly together, but Serentine Mosaic is just, I don't know. It's hard to put into words because Sailing to Serantium, I loved. Everyone told me Lord of Emperors was better. It is better. And because of the inclusion of a character that's introduced for the first time here in the beginning of this book that I just happen to love. But I got to the climax, which is about right before I stopped last time. And I was so impressed with the climax because it was thrilling and because it tied into a lot of decisions that people had made, not just in this book, but in book one. And not just the decision, but the way they went about that decision. And how, you always got to pay the piper. You're always, if you take something from someone in maybe an unjust way, there's always going to be a comeback. There's always the get back, as they say. And I just think Guy Gavriel Kay executed it wonderfully and tied it into the culture of this city, which is what he's best at with writing and just a structure that isn't wholly standard. Like he will take his time and jump into a POV and not give you their name. And I don't know, he just has his own way of doing things that I find to be surprising. When he takes a risk of approaching a scene from like a different POV that you wouldn't expect, for me, it always pays off. So the climax was excellent. But the big thing about this book that was surprising, and the thing I found surprising about the whole thing, is the falling action is really a good portion of the back end of this book. Like you have this big moment that for me was like the end all be all for the book as far as like climax goes. And then a lot of figuring out what the fallout of that is, but then putting our characters through the next steps. And I think at the end of this, I feel so satisfied. And this book is really about what comes next in life after a great feat or some turmoil or a terrible thing that happens to you, especially loss, right? This book covers that all. It wraps up so neatly. You feel like you dropped into this world in a moment in time and you've learned about this big historical period that really doesn't span terribly long. But this is something that if you visited this world 5,000 years in the future, there'd probably still be an account of this, and maybe it would be written just like this. It's a beautiful book. And when people ask me what books should be adapted for television, my new answer, if I can remember, I always forget when people ask me, but like, I think the Serentine Mosaic would be a phenomenal limited series. You could probably do a movie out of it, but I really feel like a limited series would be the best. I don't even know if you would need 2 seasons. I think you could do a 10 to 12 episode season and cover this whole book. And it would or this whole series, a duology. And it would be amazing. And I think someone like HBO, I'm an HBO fanboy, I feel like they would do such a good job with it. And it would not buck against like A Song of Ice and Fire because it's so low fantasy. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's historical fiction, historical fantasy as we call it. And the fantastical elements that are hinted at or alluded to or whatever, like they would not be prominent enough for people to be like, oh, this is just like Game of Thrones. Because even though Game of Thrones is low fantasy, there are dragons and House of the Dragon especially, right? This is just a phenomenal, like,
timepiece almost, like of jumping back into a Byzantine era type deal, right? It almost makes me wonder if Guy Gavriel Kay could like switch it over to Byzantine and then just do a historical fiction show. Listen, we don't need adaptations for everything. I'm a fan of books. That's why I have a book channel. But, you know, people always talk about, oh, I want this, adapt this and that. No one ever talks about Guy Gavriel Kay, man. This dude is just over here writing classics. And I feel like we should pay more attention to it. Lord of Emperors is fantastic. One of my favorite books of this year so far, and without a doubt, a just satisfying conclusion to the Sarantine Mosaic. Another Guy Gavriel Kay down. I have plenty more to read, but like, I don't know. There's also not that many more to read. I'm kind of sad about it. But this is one I will reread for sure. No, I almost said Forest Mage. Shaman's Crossing. I keep thinking about Forest Mage because my friends that really love this series all love Forest Mage. Like Forest Mage kind of carries the whole trilogy for them, which is good to hear because I am enjoying this book one. I'm about halfway through, as you can tell. And there's a little bit more going on here than I thought. I had just kind of got introduced through a couple intro long chapters. I was a little bit surprised with the way the book opened up establishing Navarre's relationship with his father and like kind of this world and the situation that we're in. And then like we go into this academy setting and it feels somewhat jarring to me. And I think where last time I had talked, I said maybe it feels a little soulless or something. I think I'm wrong about that. I don't think soulless is a very accurate term for this. But I can't help but to compare it to the Fitz novels, and whatever your mileage is on those, you know, it's all gonna be personal experience. You could like these more than that. This is from me and my experience. Like there is something about the recanting of the tale through Fitz's eyes. You know him as an older man is writing the story, and there's some sense of like, you know, recalling these things, and you can feel that really strong frame narrative. Whereas this is first person retrospective, but I don't feel that as much. And I don't feel like she's leaning into it as much. This is also published around like, I think 2004, 2005. And now that I'm in the academy setting and I'm seeing a kid who is getting stuffed into essentially a closet with other noble kids, soldier sons, but they're a part of like a new guard of families. So the old guard is treating them badly. Like that's the whole conflict essentially at this academy, is that like, we're the old families, you're the new money, and we don't like you. So for the time it was released, I kind of wonder if Robin Hobb was like looking possibly, or maybe even, you know, publisher obviously has something to say about it, but I wonder if this was made in conversation with like the Harry Potter boom in the 2000s. I'm not saying that she did do that. It isn't really all that much like Harry Potter, except that there's, you know, an academy and someone's going and they're being treated a little bit poorly by kids who think they're entitled. You know, this isn't exclusive to Harry Potter. And before you tell me, yes, I know. There's other academies before Harry Potter. I know. I'm just saying at this time, it was selling millions of books. So maybe that was possibly her take on it. Now, the cool thing about this is that it's coming at it from a much more mature angle, I think, and adding in a whole lot of like geopolitical stuff with the Plains people, which I didn't realize how much more there was to the Plains people. I said, oh, you know, it's Plains people who are called barbarians. We're colonizing them, blah. They have magic, we have technology, and that is it. But the Plains people are a lot more complicated than that. There are the Plains people that are, in their own rights, kind of hunters and kill or be killed. And those are the people that are kind of trading. Like there's a little bit of a truce there, but there's a lot of edge to it, which is going to be clearly a big part of a romance at some point. I mean, we already get introduced to a character that has started dating one of the Plains people or had children with them, and that is considered like an abomination. But outside of that, there's other like sectors of this area that have different tribes, essentially. So you have these forest dwellers that are super deep in the forest, and these are like the real magical people, and they have a sensitivity to light, which is, I don't know, I just thought that was kind of cool. Like I think forests in general are kind of cool, and someone that's been dwelling there forever. I assume that's how they became sensitive to light. Maybe they went to the forest because they were already sensitive to light. I'm not sure. And these people are called the Specks, and it's said that they carry some disease that is like plague-like, and this is why you shouldn't really interact with them. You also shouldn't definitely mate with them, according to, you know, what people are telling each other here. So there's like a lot more to the Plains people that we didn't get really early on, and I like that. There's a lot of talk about survival and honor because this expedition going out and pushing the limits of this of this empire, I guess you would want to call it, out onto the plains. You know, they're having to survive in these tough places that they haven't been before and expanding. So there's a lot of talk about survival. There's a lot of talk about honor and like you would rather be dead than to dishonor yourself. So, you know, that's kind of a running through point for these people. And when they're doing these things is that it's all for honor. And then they're out in nature. And Robin Hobb's nature descriptions for me are beautiful. I feel very in the moment and in the atmosphere with this. And I have enjoyed just hearing her describe nature. I know that sounds bland, and this is not a blow your wig back type of thing. This is not something that's going to be unrelenting in its pace at all. But for the methodical pace, those are the things that I'm really enjoying. A lot of like the culture stuff is also strange. Like there's this night where essentially wives are allowed to go and be unfaithful, and I think there's a name for it. Let me see what it's called. I didn't write down the name, which is unfortunate, but it's like they have free will to just like break their marriage vows and go sleep with people. Though they said, of course, no one actually does this, but I'm sure people do. And then with the whole like Cadona thing, I think sexual agency is going to be explored a good amount in this book. In what ways, I'm curious. I'm sure that Navarre eventually will be a part of that conversation. At least that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. But Navarre, right at this point, going into the academy, kind of being chosen to be a soldier son because that's just how it is. That's how their religion kind of dictates a second-born son. It isn't something I think he's thrilled to be a part of. And it seems like he's really just seeking out his dad's acceptance, which is a theme or a plot device that I can get behind. It makes me very sympathetic to the character, even though Navarre, at this point, isn't the most intriguing character and certainly pisses me off at times. There's a character named Gord that's at the academy, and Gord is overweight. And Navarre makes sure to tell us every second that he can about how it's just such a shame that Gord is just so fat and so disgusting and he should take care of his body. Now, I think what Hobb is getting at is showing that Navarre has biases against people because of the way his father has taught him, who he holds in such high regard. But from the very first chapter, we see that there are conflicts with the morality that his dad is like teaching him. And in the way that this civilization that has all the answers for all these barbarians, you know, how they interact with the world and themselves is not great. It's not great. So that was a bit grating, but like I understand what we're doing. We're trying to get Navarre over as an imperfect character with biases, which, you know, everyone has, as people. So it makes him a little bit more human, but it is frustrating, and I kind of want to slap Navarre whenever he gets into these moods. There's this big chapter about math, by the way, at the academy. I did not like it at all. That killed a lot of my momentum. I don't want to hear about exponents or any of that nonsense. But within the academy, he has a group of boys that he's hanging around, and I think that there's something to be said about the camaraderie of this. And, you know, for all intents and purposes, I think even if wherever you grew up and you had a small group of people that you were around in school and you hadn't made friends yet, it's those little kindnesses, is that his word? When people do you a kind favor, like helping you with your homework or holding the door open or making sure that you turned in your homework on time. And it's tough to be a kid because when you're a kid, you think the world revolves around you and you're the only person, and kids can be brutal. So when someone pays you that small kindness, it's like, that's how these lifelong bonds can be formed over such a simple little thing. Someone sharing with you an apple from their lunch or a sugar cookie or something like that. And there's something kind of special about that simplicity of bond whenever you're a child, especially in a new setting, an academy or school or whatever. And I think that's fairly realistic. I mean, I know I had friends that, to this day, you know, I remember just a small kind favor they did that is so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but in the moment meant a lot to me because I felt so awkward and alone in a scenario. So I think she captures that really well. This book is not off to the races. I am kind of, you know, right now I'm middling on it. You know, this is like a solid read. There are times where I really love Robin Hobb's writing, but I still feel like Navarre is not the main character that I was kind of hoping for. Not that his characteristics, like I don't mind the fact that he's a little bit timid. I just want a little bit more out of him. And I'm sure we will get that. And the people that are surrounding him are starting to get more interesting, but no more math scenes. For the love of God, no more math scenes. I'm trying to get to the end of this book, and I hope I have a positive experience. I can go to Force Mage because that's the one that everyone says is supposed to be really good. When I said Serentine Mosaic, I finished it. You know, I said I read a lot of book ones and they're fine or they're good, but they don't get me to continue. Like The Waking Fire by Anthony Ryan's a really good example. It's a really good book, one. It has some cool stuff going for it, but I haven't thought about it much since. And I hope that there's something in Shaman's Crossing that can kind of propel me with more momentum. Because right now, just getting past like the initiation, which, by the way, the things I'm mentioning are not spoilers. Like, trust me, they're not. But there's also not a ton happening, so maybe you'll get to this point, you'll be like, man, Jimmy already told me everything that happened. But I don't think that they're true spoilers. But, we just got past the initiation, so I'm kind of hoping now that everything's been set up for the first, like, 300 pages, that these last 320 or so pages, we get some more things. Because there was some interesting hooks at the beginning that I feel like are going to kind of pay off maybe a little bit later or at the end of the book. Hopefully near the end of the book and not later as in later in the series, which has to do with like the forest dwellers and stuff. So that's it. I'm going to get back to reading. I didn't start any other books. I'm going to try to finish this one. I really wanted this reading vlog to be out already. Sucks. I need to do a better job of picking 2 books that I know that I'm going to finish in like a week, because I'd like to do 2 reading vlogs a month, and it looks like it's only going to be 1 this month. But thanks for listening to me ramble. My cat never did come back, unless if he did and I didn't see him. But maybe I'll try to get a cat in the next shot or something. I'm having a good time. I'm having fun. The Hobb stuff is like kind of calming because it's slice of life, like she always seems to write. But I'm also kind of excited to start some other stuff like Tad Williams, which would crown the sequels for Oceanard, epic fantasy. I wish I could edit, because I would add in like like the horns, and maybe I'll ask Alan how to do it. All right, I'll see you in the next update. right. I just got back from golf practice. First time attempting to golf in the last few weeks. I'm pretty bad, but Kelsey's worse, so that's good at least. So I finished up Shaman's Crossing, and this book, I gotta say, ended on a high note. The last 3 chapters of this were by far my favorite, by far the things I was most interested in, and does exactly what a book 1 should do, which is make me wonder what comes next. So as a book 1, I think this is a success. I think that there's a little bit of Ged from Earthsea in here, and maybe possibly taking some inspiration from the Taoism that Ursula K. Le Guin explores in that story, and the shadow self, and kind of maybe hinting at this here. And funny enough, Philip Chase's self-published debut, The Way of a Dan, has a similar aspect to it as this. I don't believe Philip has actually read Shaman's Crossing, but it's, boy that isn't fully grown, still learning things, runs into some sort of magical thing, and then it affects his life in massive ways. And from there on forth, he is making his own decisions, but there's also this extra force. It's interesting. I had to think of The Way of a Dan, and I like both of those stories and what they do. Actually, it's my favorite part of both parts of these stories. So I'm happy with the ending of this. Do I know if I'm going to go straight into Forest Mage? I would like to, but I'm also going to be starting The Last King of Ostenard soon, like probably in the next day or two. I don't know when I'm going to have time to kind of jump back into the series. And I also want to finish Many Colored Land by Julian May. So it's unclear, when I will get the Forest Mage, but I will, which is the point. So book 1 succeeded in that. How good is it? I think it's above average. I think Hobb's writing carries that. I think if you explain the story, it's one that people can get behind, but it's not one that is totally mind-blowingly unique, but it is executed well for the type of story that it is. And I just happen to like Robin Hobb's writing. If you didn't enjoy like Farseer or Robin Hobb in general. I don't think this is going to change much for you unless you really just didn't like Fitz. Maybe you'll like Navarre, who I still find to be fairly unremarkable, even though I think his worldview changing, him questioning himself, like it is all very natural and realistic, actually, which is really great. But it seems like the things that stand out about him more are his biases and his negatives. And yes, those are being challenged. And he's changing his mind, his worldview, but he doesn't have like the positives I would really love to see. Even though, I mean, it's not like he's all bad or anything like that, but I don't know. There's just not enough going for him, but maybe that could change possibly, especially with the ending of this book and wondering where it's going to go. Still very burnout on Academy settings. I don't want to see them. I don't want to see them anymore for a while, you know? So if book 2 takes, you know, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what book 2 does. But this was a success. I like this book. It was a Patreon pick of the month. Definitely a good one. Nice to be back with Robin Hobb. She does so many things well. I just don't think that this is going to be a series. Like if you're not a big fan of how she did, like, you know, plot or pacing in the first series, I doubt that this one's going to change your mind much. So that's about it, you know. Great month, great reading vlog. I was hoping to get out 2 vlogs this month. That didn't happen. So I'm going to have my wrap up here coming out in the next few days, probably the next week or so. But I'm hoping the next vlog will be Witchwood Crown, which is a big boy. And then maybe I'll read something short alongside it. I would really like to try to get these vlogs down to like 2 weeks at a time so I can have one out every 2 weeks. That'd be really great. But, you know, still figuring it out. Still trying new things. So thanks for being here. Shaman's Crossing, good book. Slightly above average. And then obviously Lord of Emperors was an absolute slammer. Highly recommend it. You should definitely read the Sarantine Mosaic. What a gorgeous book. What a gorgeous duology, and should definitely be adapted to a television show if they're looking for something to do over there at HBO. It'd be great. But yeah, the vlogs are going to get interesting because I got a busy summer. We got House of the Dragon Season 2 coming out. I'm sure I'll mention that in the vlogs as I go. And on top of that, you know, I'm going to reread The Dance of Dragons and Fire and Blood. So maybe that'll be a part of the next vlog. Maybe I'll do Witchwood Crown and the dance, not all Fire and Blood, but A Dance with Dragon. The Dance of Dragons, sorry. All right. If you like the video, hit like. If you dislike it and you hate me, you can hit dislike. If you love to think about subscribing, Patreon in the description. It's optional, but it is always appreciated. You know the deal. I'll see you on the next one. Love you. I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons, but especially my King's Guard, which include Bridger, Zan, Adam K, Amel, Jonathan J, Prithvi, Eric B, Chadia, Taylor D, Matthias D, Carlos, Yolanda, John C, John, Garrick, Evie, Henrik, Benjamin C, Sebastian M, Frank C, C. Scott, Jacob Wade, Darren, Jobot, Terrence F, Michael B, Lauren M, Nicholas E, Kai C, Kev, Ryan, Shad, Amanda V, Ikaika, RJ, Stewart, Oscar, Derry, Tanner, Stromboli Bones, Damon H, Kuiper, Adam, Caitlin S, Karen G, Slay, and Mark J, and Mike J. Thank you all so much. You're the best.